The rain fell heavy on the industrial sector that night, the kind of rain that made a man feel like the world was washing away everything he used to know. Marcus Webb was 62 years old, and he had spent the last 40 of those years working in the atmospheric processors that kept the colony alive. His hands were weathered from years of maintenance work, his beard more gray than black now, and his back reminded him every morning that those 40 years had taken their toll. He was walking home from his shift when he heard it. Not a cry exactly, but something caught between a cry and a sound he had never heard before in his life. It came from behind the old supply containers near the sector exit, where nobody ever went anymore because the new automation had made that area redundant years ago. Marcus should have kept walking. The rain was cold, his apartment was warm, and his dinner was waiting. He was tired in the way that only comes when you have spent decades doing the same thing every single day. But something in that sound pulled at him. Maybe it was because he remembered what it felt like to be lost. Maybe it was because he had a daughter once, a long time ago, before his wife had taken her away to the outer colonies, before the divorce had hollowed out the center of his life. He turned and walked toward the sound. Behind the containers, in a space barely large enough for a person to shelter from the rain, was something that made Marcus stop breathing for a moment. She was small, perhaps 6 or 7 years old in human terms, though he would later learn that she was actually much older. Her skin had a pale blue tint to it, almost luminescent in the darkness. Her ears came to points, and her eyes were large and green, filled with the kind of fear that only comes when you are completely alone in a place where nothing makes sense. She was wearing something that looked like a suit, though it was torn and damaged, and her small body was shaking from cold and terror. Marcus stood very still. In all his years living in the colony, he had never heard of aliens actually being here, actually having a presence in the settled areas. There were stories, of course, rumors. But those were the kinds of things people talked about late at night when they had had too much to drink, not things that actually happened to ordinary maintenance workers. The girl made that sound again, that desperate, frightened noise. And something in Marcus, something that had been sleeping for a very long time, woke up. He moved slowly, deliberately, trying to look as small and unthreatening as a large man could look. He had once watched a nature program about how to approach a frightened animal, and he tried to remember what they had said. Slow movements.
Keep your voice quiet.
Don't make direct eye contact. Hello there, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. I won't hurt you. I know you're scared. I'm not going to hurt you. The girl made a chittering sound and pressed herself further back against the container. Her hands, which had only 4 fingers each, were clenched into fists. But she didn't run. Perhaps she understood that there was nowhere to run to. Perhaps she was too frightened. Or perhaps, in whatever way beings like her understood such things, she sensed that this old man with the gray beard was not a danger to her. Marcus sat down slowly on the wet ground, not looking directly at her, just sitting beside her in the rain. He was soaked through within minutes, but he didn't move. He just sat there, letting her see that he was not going anywhere, that he was not a threat. After a long time, the girl stopped shaking so much. After an even longer time, she made a small sound, almost like a question. Are you alone? Marcus asked. He didn't know if she could understand his words, but he spoke them anyway, his voice gentle and steady. Is your mother somewhere? Your family? The girl made more sounds, a complex series of chirps and tones that Marcus could not begin to understand. But the meaning was clear enough. She was lost. She was terrified. She did not know where she was, or how she had gotten there, or where her family had gone. Marcus understood loneliness. He had lived with it for so long that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to not be lonely. But looking at this small, terrified creature in the rain, he remembered all at once. He remembered the day his daughter was born, remembered holding her in his arms and feeling like he would die to protect her. He remembered the sound of her laugh. He remembered how that had all been taken away from him slowly over the years, until there was nothing left but memories and regret. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'm going to help you. I don't know how, and I don't know if I can, but I'm going to try." That's what you do when someone needs help. You try. He stood up slowly and extended his hand. The girl looked at it, her large eyes moving from his hand to his face and back again. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, very slowly, she reached out and placed her small, four-fingered hand in his. The first thing Marcus did was take her to his apartment. It was not a big place. After the divorce, he had downsized, taken a small unit in an old section of the colony that had been built during the early days, before the new developments had pushed out all the character and left only efficiency in its place. It was the kind of place where people didn't ask too many questions about their neighbors, where comings and goings were not closely monitored. He helped her out of the rain and into a warm shower, turning his back while she adjusted to it. He brought her dry clothes from his closet, pieces that were far too big, but at least would keep her warm. He made her hot tea, though she seemed confused by it at first before drinking it in small, cautious sips. It was only when she was clean and warm that he realized she was hurt. There was a mark on her arm, something that looked almost like a burn, and she winced when he touched it. Her left foot was swollen, as if she had been walking on an injury. Marcus found his old first aid kit, a relic from when he had been younger and had gone hiking, back when he still believed that his life would contain more than just work and loneliness. He cleaned the burn gently, applied ointment, wrapped her foot. She made small chirping sounds but did not pull away. When she was settled on his couch under a blanket, with a bowl of broth that he had heated up for her, Marcus sat in his chair across from her and asked the question he had been avoiding. "What's your name?" The girl made a series of sounds, a musical trill that started high and ended low. Marcus tried to repeat it and failed, the sounds coming out harsh and wrong from his human throat. The girl made a small clicking noise that might have been laughter. "I'll call you Isla," he said finally. "That's close enough. And I'm Marcus. Marcus Webb." Isla looked at him and made a soft humming sound, as if accepting the name. She drank her broth slowly and deliberately, and Marcus watched her, thinking about how similar she was to a young child and how completely alien she was at the same time. Her movements were precise, controlled. Her eyes took in everything about the small apartment with a kind of careful attention that suggested she was memorizing it, cataloging every detail. When she had finished eating, Marcus made up the bed in his second room, the small space where boxes of old memories had been accumulating dust. He had already decided that she could not go to the authorities. There was no way of knowing what would happen to her if he did. These were uncertain times, and an alien presence in the colony would likely be treated as a security threat. They would take her away. They would probably interrogate her. They might hurt her. Marcus had spent a lifetime following rules, doing what he was told, and he had learned that there were some things that were more important than rules. Over the next few days, Marcus began to piece together Isla's story. She had been traveling with her family on what she called a search vessel, looking for resources or information or something else entirely that Marcus could not quite grasp. There had been some kind of accident near the colony, a systems failure. She had been separated from the others and had ended up wandering lost through the industrial sector, guided only by some kind of internal compass that pulled her toward the center of the colony where other beings like her might be found. Isla knew some words in Standard Common, the trade language that had become universal among the settled worlds. Her accent was strange, her grammar a bit off, but Marcus was able to understand most of what she said. She had learned the language, she explained, because her family believed in preparing for all possibilities. They were explorers, she told him proudly. seekers of knowledge and connection. "Where is your mother?" Marcus asked her on the third night, as they sat together looking out his small window at the rain that had not stopped falling. "Tell me about her." Isla made a long series of chirping sounds, her voice filled with longing and something that sounded like grief. When she shifted into common words, her voice was small and frightened. "Her name is Sarah. She is tall and strong, and she knows everything. She always knows what to do. She was on the survey ship, and when the systems failed, I was looking at the atmospheric data from the colony below. The ship began to fall. Everything was chaos. I remember the alarms, and then I remember the falling feeling. And then I was being ejected in a small pod and falling through the atmosphere and landing in the water near the industrial sector." She paused, her large green eyes filling with something that might have been tears, though they were a different color than human tears, more violet than clear. "I don't know if she made it out," Isla said. "I don't know if my family is alive. I've been trying to reach them on the emergency frequency, but I don't know if anyone can hear me." Marcus reached out and placed his hand on her small shoulder. It was such a human gesture, but Isla leaned into it, accepting comfort in the way that transcended the vast differences between their kinds. "We'll find them," Marcus said. "I promise you, we will find them." He didn't know how, and he wasn't sure he should make promises he might not be able to keep. But looking at this small, scared girl, Marcus found that he needed to make that promise. He needed to believe that there was something he could do that mattered, something that would justify his existence beyond just maintaining atmospheric processors for 40 years. Finding Isla's family, it turned out, was far more complicated than Marcus had anticipated. He couldn't exactly go to the authorities and ask them to help locate a lost alien search vessel. He couldn't post about it on the colony message boards. He couldn't do any of the normal things a person would do when trying to find someone who was lost. Instead, he did what he had always done when faced with a problem. He used his knowledge of the colony systems. Marcus had spent 4 decades learning every inch of the facility's infrastructure. He knew where the communication relays were located, how they worked, which ones were monitored, and which ones had been forgotten by the maintenance schedule. Over the years, as the colony had grown and evolved, certain systems had been replaced and left in place, running backup protocols that nobody paid much attention to anymore. It was in one of these forgotten systems that Marcus set up a transmission.
It was risky.
If anyone was looking for unauthorized broadcasts, they would find it. But it was also as close to invisible as anything could be in a monitored facility. He used Isla's emergency frequency, the code that she insisted she could still access through the damaged communication device that had been attached to her suit. Then he waited. 3 days later, there was a response. It was brief and encoded, but Isla understood it immediately. Her family had survived. Her mother and father and 2 siblings had made it to the surface in another pod. They had been moving through the industrial sector trying to locate the emergency beacon from Isla's pod, and they had picked up the transmission. They were coming to find her. Marcus should have felt relieved. Instead, when he saw the joy in Isla's face, when she made those happy chirping sounds and danced around his small apartment in a way that somehow expressed gratitude and excitement and hope all at once, he felt something else entirely. He felt a weight settling into his chest, a heaviness that he recognized as the beginning of loss. She had been with him for only 6 days. 6 days out of 62 years. But in those 6 days, something had shifted in Marcus. He had started to matter again. Isla needed him. She looked at him with trust and affection. She had begun to call him by his name, and when she did, it sounded like something precious. "They will be here tonight," Isla said, bouncing with excitement. "We will go back to the ship. We will go home. You will come with us, Marcus. You can leave this colony. You can see the stars. Marcus felt his heart crack a little. He looked around his small apartment at all the things he had collected over the years, all the evidence of a life lived alone. He looked at Isla, at her joy and hope and youthful belief that the future could be better than the past. "I can't," he said quietly. "This is my home.
These are my people.
I belong here." Isla's excitement faltered. She made a small, confused sound. "But you're sad here. I can see it in your face. You are always sad." Marcus had no answer to that because it was true. He had been sad for a very long time. He had built a life around that sadness, learned to live with it, stopped expecting anything different. "Some people are meant to stay in one place," he said. "Some people are meant to put down roots and accept their life as it is. That's me, Isla. I'm someone who stays." That night, they waited for Isla's family in the same spot where Marcus had first found her, behind the old supply containers near the sector exit. The rain had finally stopped, and the night air was cold and clear. Above, the stars were visible through the thin atmosphere of the colony, and Marcus wondered if somewhere up there, beyond the reaches of settled space, there were other worlds, other lives, other ways of being that he would never know. Then they arrived. The shuttle emerged from the darkness with a grace that defied the laws of physics Marcus thought he understood. It landed silently, and the hatch opened to reveal three figures that looked like Isla but larger, older, bearing the marks of a life lived in ways Marcus could not comprehend. The first to emerge was her mother, Sarah. She was indeed tall and strong, exactly as Isla had described her. Her skin was a slightly deeper shade of blue than Isla's, and her eyes held the kind of intelligence and authority that came from someone who had spent a lifetime making difficult decisions. When she saw Isla, she made a sound that transcended language, a cry of joy and relief that Marcus felt in his chest. Isla ran to her, and Sarah lifted her up and held her close, making soft chirping sounds that sounded like a mother's lullaby in any language. The other two figures joined them, and for a moment, there was a reunion that spoke to something fundamental in Marcus's understanding of what it meant to be alive, what it meant to have family, what it meant to be loved. Then Sarah turned to Marcus, and something shifted in her expression. She set Isla down and approached him slowly, her movements deliberate and careful. "You saved my daughter," she said, her accent thick, but her words clear. "You risked everything for someone who is not your kind. Why?" Marcus thought about how to answer that. He thought about loneliness and loss and the sudden, unexpected gift of being needed. He thought about his own daughter, about all the time he had lost with her, all the years that could never be recovered. "Because she needed help," Marcus said finally, "and because I could give it." Sarah studied him for a long moment. Then she reached out and placed her small, four-fingered hand on his chest, over his heart. When she withdrew it, Marcus felt something shift, as if she had somehow seen all the way to the deepest parts of him and found something that he had thought was broken beyond repair. "What is your name?" she asked. "Marcus Webb." "Thank you, Marcus Webb, for saving my daughter's life. And thank you for reminding her that there is kindness in the universe." Isla hugged Marcus, her small arms around his neck, her face pressing against his. She made soft sounds, and Marcus understood that she was telling him something important, something that went beyond words. She was telling him that she would not forget him, that the time they had spent together mattered, that he had changed her life and she had changed his. And then she was gone. She boarded the shuttle with her family, and the hatch sealed behind them. Marcus watched as the vessel rose silently into the night sky, its running lights fading as it climbed higher and higher until it disappeared among the stars. He stood in the darkness for a long time after they were gone, rain beginning to fall again from the now clouded sky. When Marcus returned to work the next day, everything had changed, and nothing had changed at all. The processors still needed to be maintained. The colony still needed its atmospheric systems to function. His coworkers still greeted him with the same indifference they always had. But something fundamental had shifted inside Marcus. He had learned that a life could be altered by a single encounter, that purpose could arrive unexpectedly and in the most unlikely of forms. He had learned that he was capable of love, of sacrifice, of mattering to someone, even if that someone was from an entirely different world. He thought often about Isla and her family, wondering where they were, what they were doing, whether Isla ever thought of him. He wondered what it would have been like to have said yes, to have boarded that shuttle and left behind everything he had ever known. He would sometimes stand on the observation deck of the colony and look up at the stars, imagining the paths that might be traveled among them. But he also understood that some people are meant to be anchors, meant to hold down the earth even as others fly toward the sky. He had saved Isla's life, and in doing so, he had saved his own. He had discovered that he was not broken beyond repair, that he could still be brave, still be capable of love, still matter in the vast and mysterious universe. 6 months after Isla's departure, Marcus received a message through one of the old, forgotten communication systems. It was brief and encrypted, but when he decoded it, his eyes filled with tears. It was a picture, transmitted from somewhere in the outer systems. It showed Isla, older now, her skin slightly deeper in color, standing on what appeared to be the deck of a ship with the stars visible behind her. She was holding something small and delicate, and her expression was one of pure joy. Beneath the image were words in common. I learned to understand the atmospheric processor systems. I am now part of my family's exploration team. I thought of you today, Marcus Webb, and I wanted you to know that I am exploring the stars. And I am teaching others what you taught me about kindness and courage. Thank you for being the light in the darkness when I was lost. You were never just a maintenance worker. You were always something more. You were hope. You were home. Marcus read the message many times. He saved it to a personal file that he carried with him. And every time he went to work, every time he stood at the atmospheric processors and kept the machines running that kept the colony alive, he thought about the small, frightened girl he had found in the rain, and how by helping her find her way home, he had finally found his own way back to himself. Life, Marcus came to understand in his final years, was not about the quantity of time you had or the importance of your position in the grand scheme of things. It was about the moments that mattered, the connections you made, the small acts of kindness that rippled out into the universe in ways you might never fully understand. He had spent 40 years maintaining systems, keeping machines running, doing his job with quiet competence and no recognition. But he had also raised his hand to a frightened child, and in doing so, he had changed 2 worlds forever, his own and hers. And that, Marcus learned, was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. As Marcus grew older and eventually retired from his position, he would sometimes receive messages through those old, forgotten communication systems. They were infrequent and always brief, but they always arrived on the same date each year, transmitted from deeper and deeper into space. Isla had grown into a woman of her kind. She had become a scientist, an explorer, someone who traveled between the stars seeking knowledge and connection, just as her family had always done. And she had never forgotten the old man who had found her lost in the rain, who had given her shelter and warmth and the confidence that the universe contained kindness as well as danger. In her final message, sent when Marcus was 84 years old and had perhaps a year left to live, she told him that she had named her daughter after him. Not by his name, but by its meaning in her language, protector of the lost. And she was training that daughter to be like him, to look for those in need, and to act with courage and compassion. Marcus read that last message and finally allowed himself to cry, letting tears fall freely for the first time in decades. He had lost much in his life. He had lost his wife and his daughter and his youth and his health. But he had not lost the ability to matter, to make a difference, to be remembered. And in the end, he realized that was the only thing that had ever really mattered anyway. The rain fell on the colony the night Marcus died, the same kind of rain that had fallen the night he found Isla. His neighbors said they heard him smiling in his sleep, and perhaps they were right. Perhaps at the very end, Marcus Webb saw something in his dreams that the living could never fully see. Perhaps he saw the vast expanse of stars and the daughter he had raised in a different world, and perhaps he finally understood that he had never been alone. Not really, not ever. His legacy lived on in the systems that continued to run the colony, maintaining the atmosphere that allowed life to flourish. But more importantly, it lived on in a young woman named Isla, and in her daughter, and in all the acts of kindness that would ripple forward through time and space because one old maintenance worker had chosen to see beyond the differences between worlds and recognize a child in need. That was Marcus Webb's final gift to the universe. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything that mattered. Thank you for listening to The Stranger in the Rain. If this story touched your heart, I would be deeply grateful if you would like this episode, share it with friends and family who appreciate thoughtful science fiction, and subscribe so you never miss our future stories. Please leave a comment below and tell us which moment in Marcus's journey resonated most with you. Your feedback helps us create the stories that matter most to listeners like you.